We're diving deep into the late 19th century today, into a moment of pure imperial drama. It's a story that sent shockwaves all the way from the deserts of Sudan to the halls of London, and believe it or not, even down to Australia. This is a story about faith, defiance, a wild personality, and a tragedy of timing that all revolves around one incredible figure. I have done my best for the honor of our country. Goodbye. Just let that sink in for a second. These are the last words General Charles Gordon ever wrote in his journal, as his entire world was literally about to come crashing down. This one sentence, it just perfectly captures the man who would become a legend, a martyr, and a symbol for an entire empire. It's the end of his story, but for us, it's the perfect place to begin. So what was the big deal? What exactly happened that, as they said at the time, electrified the British Empire? Well, it all came down to the fall of one single remote city, Khartoum. Okay, so picture this. It's January 26th, 1885. For 10 brutal months, the city of Khartoum has been completely surrounded and cut off. And on this day, the defenses are finally breached. The Mahdi's forces just swarm into the city, overwhelming the starving, exhausted defenders. And somewhere in all that chaos, General Gordon is killed. And here is the absolute gut punch of the story. A massive British rescue mission, sent specifically to save him, finally arrives, and they can see the city. But it's January 28th. They're just 2 days too late. The city has already fallen. 2 days. That razor-thin margin between a dramatic rescue and a total disaster is exactly what turned a military defeat into a massive national tragedy. Right. To really understand how things got so bad, we need to rewind a little and talk about the man on the other side of those city walls. His name was Muhammad Ahmed. He was this incredibly charismatic Islamic leader who declared himself the Mahdi, or the Guided One, a kind of prophesied redeemer. He rallied a huge and powerful force with one goal in mind: drive out the Egyptian and British-backed government that was running Sudan. This wasn't just some rebellion. To him and his followers, this was a holy war. So who was the guy they sent to deal with this? General Charles Gordon was basically a Victorian superstar, a brilliant engineer, a war hero they called Chinese Gordon for his victories in China, and he was a deeply, almost mystically religious Christian. The guy really believed he was an instrument of God's will. Now here's the crucial part. Look at his mission. He was sent to Khartoum with one single order: get the Egyptian soldiers and civilians out of there. He was supposed to manage an evacuation, not dig in for a fight. Meanwhile, back in London, no one could agree on what to do. On one hand, you had the Prime Minister, William Gladstone, who actually called the Mahdi's forces people struggling to be free. He wanted absolutely nothing to do with another messy colonial war. But on the other hand, the press and the public saw a Christian hero, their Gordon, facing down what they called a fanatical horde. They were screaming for military action. This political tug-of-war back home, it would end up having fatal consequences. So, faced with this mess on the ground and mixed signals from home, Gordon made a decision, a fateful choice that went directly against his orders and pretty much sealed his own destiny. Instead of organizing a retreat, Gordon the engineer does what he does best. He starts fortifying the city. And sure enough, within a month, he's completely surrounded. The Mahdi actually offered him safe passage out, told him he could just leave and go home. But Gordon refused. He saw this as a test of his faith and his honor. For 10 long, grueling months, he held on, desperately hoping for that relief force that was being debated and delayed back in London, the force that showed up just a little too late. You can only imagine what it was like inside the city. It was grim. Food that was supposed to last 6 months had to be stretched to 10. People were literally starving to death. To keep things from totally collapsing, Gordon did something amazing. He started printing his own money, basically IOUs, all personally signed by him, just to pay his soldiers. It was an act of pure stubborn willpower. So when the news of Gordon's death finally broke, it wasn't just a political headache in Britain. It set off a powerful reaction from the furthest corners of the empire. All of a sudden, those people struggling to be free were recast as the murderers of a national hero. The public grief was overwhelming, and it very quickly turned into a call for revenge. The honor of the British Empire, everyone felt, had been insulted, and it had to be restored. And then, from halfway around the world, a really surprising offer of help came in. 770 men from the colony of New South Wales in Australia volunteered to go to Sudan to avenge Gordon. This was a huge deal. It was the very first time a colony had ever sent its own troops to fight in one of the empire's wars. So they sailed from Sydney Harbor to these huge cheering crowds, a real symbol of imperial unity. They were ready for a fight. But the reality of their journey was going to be pretty tragic. Of the hundreds who went, 9 would not come home alive. And here's the anticlimax. You'd think they died in some glorious battle, right? Nope. Their time in Sudan was actually short and pretty uneventful. They got into a few minor skirmishes, but never fought a major battle. All 9 of the men who died from disease, like dysentery. It was a brutal reminder that, often, the biggest enemy in these colonial wars wasn't the other army, it was just the conditions. This quote, wow, it just brings the whole grand imperial story crashing down to a painfully human level. These were the words of a father, David Weir, saying goodbye to his son, Robert. And his premonition was tragically right. It's a powerful reminder that for every big story about empires and honor, there are countless small personal stories of heartbreak and loss. So, after everything was said and done, how was Gordon remembered? Well, as you can probably guess, his legacy became just as controversial as his life had been. For many, many people, he was the ultimate Christian hero. His death was seen as a noble sacrifice for God and for his country. It was proof that the British Empire had a divine mission to, civilize the world. He was the perfect poster boy for that idea. But not everyone saw it that way. Not by a long shot. Some newspapers, like Sydney's Bulletin, just mercilessly mocked the whole thing. They didn't see a hero. They saw a raving crank, a bloodthirsty fanatic who disobeyed orders and got exactly what was coming to him. Was he a saint, or was he a madman? The debate just raged on. In the end, though, the story of Gordon's last stand became way more powerful than the actual man. His heroic death gave the British the perfect excuse to go back and reconquer Sudan over a decade later. And his legend was sealed in memorials, in books, and even in a big Hollywood movie. He was transformed from a complicated, controversial person into a simple, powerful myth of imperial sacrifice. The fall of Khartoum really shows you that the story we tell can be everything. Was Gordon a hero who died for honor, or was he a religious zealot who brought about his own destruction? Was this a noble mission, or just a disastrous colonial misadventure? The answers, it turns out, really depend on who's telling the story, and that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about.